Hello everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building a rocket from spare parts and odds and ends and things like this, what I call a junk box rocket. And so I've already got the design laid out here, but I will go through it. If we look at the 3D view here, my intention is for a white nose cone, a black body, and then silver tube fins. Now the tube fins in particular, these I got from R.E.A.R, and they use them to hold propellant charges in their 29 millimeter reloads. So I've got a whole bunch of these that I saved when I was reloading motors there. And so I finally got enough of them to make a tube finned rocket here. Now the body tube itself is another BT50 tube. And this is left over from another project I did. So it used to be a longer tube, and I cut off a relatively small amount actually to make another project that I did recently called the Mini Initiator, which is a 3D printed rocket. The nose here is an approximation. So this is a 3D printed nose on a resin printer. And it actually has little lobes that go around the circumference here. And I'll show you that when we get to the laboratory and actually start building this. All right, if we go back into our plan view here, pretty standard motor mount here. So a 7 centimeter long motor mount tube, 2 centering rings, and an engine block. Now, one thing I've done here that is kind of hard to see, but back here, this is an Estes screw-on motor retainer, so I'm not using an engine clip. And this will be flush with the body tube here. And just notice that my aft centering ring should also be flush with the back end here. So that's going to be, let's try that at 0. Nope, too far. Let's try minus 0.5. There we go. Okay, and then the engine tube sticks out just far enough for the male part of the retainer system there to fit on and be flush here. And again, we'll see this when we go to the building part of this video. Okay, within the body tube then, up here we've got a screw eye because this nose cone did not come with its own eyelet there like many plastic ones do. This right here is a snap swivel. If you've seen my other videos, you know I like to use snap swivels to allow to change out parachutes really quickly. The parachute itself here, currently I have it listed as a 15-inch parachute. This can actually be anything from a 12-inch to an 18-inch, and mostly dependent upon how windy it is. So if it's really windy out, I'd use a 12-inch. If it's really calm and I have a big field, I might use the 15 or 18-inch. Okay, so that we can actually come in here and simulate if we want to change it. All right, so I'm going to come in here and we'll change the parachute to a standard Estes 12-inch here. Okay, and we'll just keep everything else the same. And if we come to our flight simulations, what I'm looking at is this ground hit velocity. Right, so we'll go ahead and come in here and rerun them all, make sure everything's up to date. Okay. Basically, I want this to be below 25 kilometers per hour. So even with a 12-inch chute, that's well within the safety margin there. Okay. My shock cord system is a hybrid, so I have a shorter piece of Kevlar here. I believe I used 200 pounds in the design. You can actually have quite a bit of leeway here. Even 100-pound Kevlar should be strong enough. I prefer the 200 just because it's a little bit wider and it's a little bit less likely to zipper the tube. And then that's connected to a longer piece here of 1/4 inch wide elastic. This is about 80 centimeters long or so. All right, and then the Kevlar portion there is actually going to be tied in to the motor mount. That gives us a very strong mount there. Okay, so I think that's about all. Our flight simulations here on Open Rocket show that we probably want to be using B-type engines or above. An A.R.E.A.R gives us an apogee of only about 24.5 meters. That's not very tall and may not be enough time for the parachute to fully open. Right? It thinks it is fine, but in reality, this could hit a little bit hard with an A.R.E.A.R in it. All right, with that, I am going to go into the lab and we will continue from there. I've moved over to the lab in the workbench here. And the first thing we're going to need to do is measure and cut the motor mount tube. So this is just a piece of BT20 tube that was left over from another project. And if you need to get tubes, you can get them from Estes or Apogee, or the two usual places. Other retailers sell them as well. All right, but we're going to need 7 centimeters here. And then I've got this tube cutting guide from Estes. And they come in lots of sizes, except that's the BT51. This is the one we need, the BT20. So we're just going to slide this over. Okay, and bring that to the line. And then these compress together. And I think this one's wearing out a little bit because it's not being as snug as it used to. All right, but now I'm just going to draw a line around here, just in case things move. Okay, and now the idea here is that you can take a hobby knife, all right, and while you've got this in the guide, you can cut it and just run the knife around. So this is trying to move a little bit. Okay, if you don't have one of these, you can also just mark it with masking tape and use the edge of the masking tape as your guide. Recheck our measurements once more. Cut that, okay. That's going to work. Now my centering rings and my thrust ring here, I either bought directly from Estes or Apogee, because you can get them in just bulk packages. Now I've also got the Estes screw-on retainer, and I'm going to use this as a guide. So on the aft end of the rocket, whichever end you want that to be, you can put this on. All right, and I'm going to mark that here. All right, and so when I put this in, what I want to do is make that my mark for my aft centering ring here. So this may be a little bit off from what I designed, but I can change that if we need to. And then my forward centering ring will just go on about 1 centimeter from the forward part of the motor mount tube, and my engine block will go in here. Alright, I'm going to use wood glue for most of this rocket. Okay, so here, first thing I'm going to do is the thrust ring here. Now usually we put glue inside the tube first, but here I do it on the ring because I don't want excess glue to get forced down into the tube. I want it to be forced out to the top, and that way the glue can't end up clogging things up for the motor down below it. Okay, now we'll just put that in, flush, remove the excess glue there. It's going to look like that. Okay, now quickly we're going to mark 1 centimeter down from the forward end. Okay, so our forward centering ring is going to go like right there. Okay, so let's back that down a little bit. Yeah, we're going to put some glue around this below the line. And then we'll bring that back in. And that kind of forms its own little fillet there. Okay, and then our aft centering ring, we said the line there, that's where our retainer is going to be. So in kind of the same way, we're just going to smear some glue on here. And we don't want a lot of excess because we don't want it getting in the way of the retainer. And in fact, if you want to, you can start it from this side and go that way. All right, once again, we're going to move that up to the line. Now this one, I'm going to have to wipe off that excess glue there. And this is where if you're to push it the opposite direction, you won't get as much glue here. But it's easily fixed. Okay, so we're just going to run that right to there. Now for the ring itself, or retaining ring there, we're going to use gel type super glue. Now on bigger rockets, mid power, high power, we would usually use epoxy for that. But here, that's a pretty small ring for epoxy, so I'm just going to use the gel super glue, which I found is actually really good at joining dissimilar surfaces like paper to plastic. Before we do it though, I'm going to take a small amount of sandpaper here, and it can be just about any grit you have laying around. But all I'm going to do is come in from the aft side, the one with the little notches on it, and I'm just going to scrape this up a little bit. And this will just give it a better bonding surface for the glue. Again, it doesn't take much. Okay, now here we do want the glue to be forced toward the centering ring. Here I'm going to take my super glue gel. I'm going to put a ring fairly close to the edge. You don't need a lot of excess here, just a uniform amount. You can kind of spread it around there with the tube. Alright, and then we're going to make sure, again, these notched side here, that goes toward the ring. And we're just going to twist this on as we go. Okay, and now we're going to let this whole thing dry. While we're waiting for the motor mount glue to dry, I'm going to turn my attention to the other end of the rocket. So this was printed with a 3D printer and a resin printer rather than a filament printer. Now this was using Creality's ABS-like resin, so that's why I've got ABS on here. It's supposed to be a little more flexible and firm than their standard resin is. And then it prints this separately. I will include the link to this STL file from Thingiverse either in the description or down in the comments, so I'll come back to that later. Now, we don't have quite perfect sizing here, so the base piece here is a little bit too wide for the shoulder, or vice versa. This is a little bit too small for this base. So we're going to have to do a little bit of sanding. Now I'm going to start out with some 60 grit sandpaper. If you are very adept at rotary tools like a Dremel, you could use that, but just be careful. This stuff will erode away very quickly. So here I'm going to first do the base piece here and see how much we can get that to come down. Ideally we want this to kind of wrap around and to be able to turn it like this. There's not a lot to grab onto here though, so we may go around and do the shoulder instead. Alright, so even with this in double or triple time here, this is starting to look like watching golf, so I'm going to take this off camera and finish it and then come back. Okay, I cheated. I went off and used a Dremel, which did this in about 10 seconds, but now this can fit inside there. And I'm not going to get it all the way in quite yet, because here, the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and screw this in. And I want to feel how tight it is. Right, that is actually pretty tight. If it was loose, I would have put a little bit of epoxy in there, but this is looking okay. So what I will do here is I'm going to put some of the super glue on the inside. Put a little bit here on the outside. Alright, we're going to go ahead and screw this back in. And if you want a little extra strength, you can go ahead and just put some epoxy right down in the bottom of that coupler piece. And maybe just a pair of pliers here. Just give me a little extra leverage there. Now I'm going to continue turning this in until about 1 turn's worth of threads are still visible there. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead, put just a little bit more of the super glue on there, kind of like a fillet. And now I'm just going to give this a little squirt of alcohol, because this will act as an accelerator. We'll do this on both sides. There we go. Alcohol's taking off the pen there. Okay, now we're going to put this in, and for this, since we're using the same type of material, and it's very smooth, I'm just going to use the regular super glue. You could also use plastic cement on this. And I'm just going to run some super glue around the edge here, and we're going to stick this in and shove it home. Okay, and then we'll just let that finish drying as we set it aside. Coming back to the motor mount, the glue's not completely dry, but it's dry enough that we can handle it. And so now I'm going to measure out about 40 centimeters worth of Kevlar line here. Now in the open rocket file I specified 200 pound. I don't have any. I have 100 pound and I have 300 pound. 100 pound is fine. Mainly this is just being fireproof. We're not going to be exerting 100 pounds of force on this rocket. And here what I'm going to do now is take my hobby knife and I'm going to cut a notch into the forward centering ring. Okay, you want to do this after the glue has set a bit so that the ring doesn't lose its integrity there. Alright, now I'm going to take one end of my Kevlar here and I'm just going to tie a knot in it around the body tube. So I'm just going to use 2 half hitches or a square knot, possibly a granny knot. Alright, now I'm going to bring that around so the knot and the line are right at that notch there. And now I'm going to take some more wood glue. Alright, and we're just going to run a bead here around the inside of that ring, covering the Kevlar. So it'll be embedded in this fillet. And just smear that around like so. Tack down that area with the loose stuff there, and once again we're going to let this dry. Next we're going to attach the tube fins. Before I do that, I'm going to double check my length here. Okay, so what we want is for this just to stick out. And I'm going to tie a loop here in the other end of the Kevlar. So if I tie it there, yep. You want this loop to be right about at the mouth of the body tube. So now we'll just tie a water knot into this to make a loop. Alright, I'm going to run it up against here. Okay, and that, see how this puts it right at the mouth there, and this is where we'll attach the elastic shock cord. And to keep that knot from unraveling here, I'm just going to put a little dot of super glue on that and let it dry as the rest of the mount dries there. Okay, now that we know that's going to be the correct length, we'll come back now to our body tube here. And I'm just going to go ahead and mark the inside of one end as aft so we don't forget it later on and put the fins on the wrong end. Okay, and now we've got 6 of our tube fin tubes. Again, I got these as packing material for Aerotech engines. If you need to make them by hand, just take a BT50 tube and then cut these to about 6.5 centimeters. Okay, now I'm just going to start with one of these to begin with, and each one we put on will serve as a guide for the next. So here I'm going to put on a bead of my wood glue, like that. Okay, and then I'm going to put this on the body tube at the aft end, flush between the 2 tubes. Alright, so those should be right up lined on each other. Okay, now there's a tendency to get impatient and start wrapping these all around. Resist that. We want this to dry first so that we have a good, well-aligned starting point, and then we can start putting the rest of the motors on. While our first tube fin is drying, I'm going to go ahead and assemble a parachute. Now I've got a box full of parachutes, and I currently don't have any 14 or 15 inch ones. So I've got a bunch of 18s and I've got a bunch of 12s. Most likely I am going to be launching this in just a couple of days. The forecast calls for a breezy day, and so I'm going to go ahead and just go with the 12-inch one here so that it doesn't get carried away as far. Alright, so the Estes parachutes come pre-strung, and you'll know by now probably that I like to use snap swivels for all of my chutes, and I'm going to do that here. So what we do is take the 3 loops of shroud lines and put those on your dominant middle finger. Alright, on the other side, pinch the middle of the parachute sheet with your undominant hand. Alright, and the idea here is to get all of those corners to approximately the same level. Now sometimes the lines get cut a little irregularly and you don't quite meet it there. Alright, but get it as close as you can. And then we're going to come back up here with our loops. Alright, you want to hang on to those back here so that they don't change length on us. We're going to pass those through the swivel end of our snap swivel here. Now the snap swivel can be of any size as long as the snap can go onto the screw eye without hanging up. And since it's a fairly small screw eye, you can use almost any size here. Alright, so mine's kind of a medium-sized one. I don't know which number it was. And then once you've got that in place, go ahead and recheck your corners. Okay, if something got really fouled up there and you need to redo it, you can just loosen this up again, re-tighten the strings, and then tighten that down once more. Once you have it where you want it, go ahead and take some white glue or wood glue and put just a little tiny dab of it right on the knot. There we go. Alright, and you just work that into the knot, and this will just keep it from coming undone as it gets used. Okay, so the main advantage of doing this is it makes very easy chute change. Okay, like I said, I'm expecting a windy weekend here, so I'm going with a smaller chute. But maybe if I've got a calmer day and I want to have a little slower descent, I can change this out, say for a 14-inch or maybe an 18-inch, just by snapping these off. Okay, now the swivel part, in theory, should help keep this from twisting as much. Now the swivel doesn't have ball bearings or anything in it, so it doesn't do that quite as well as one might think. But it does do a little bit of that. Okay, but now I can just set this aside as well. And I'm going to come back to my body tube. So that first tube fin, the glue is still wet, but it has set. I'm going to do the same thing now on the other side. So again, we're just going to make a bead of glue down the length of this. Alright, and this one is going to go on this side. Now make sure you've got something down that if you get glue on it, you don't care too much. I'm about ready to change out this cutting mat, so I don't worry about it too much if I get some glue on there. Okay, and now we're just going to let those dry. I'm going to reposition that just a little. But now we'll let those dry all flat relative to each other here. Now that the glue is dried on the first 2 of the tube fins here, we'll use them as guides for the others. So I can take one of these now, put it on top, and then I'm just going to mark where the 2 tubes touch on each occasion here. And then we'll put some glue on those. Okay, and then we're going to bring that in so that the glue touches each of the 2 tubes that we're matching it up to. If we have to, we can turn it a little bit just to get better contact there. Okay, so we got that one going. And then we can put the second one in place. like this, and it's going to have 3 points of contact. And we'll put a line of glue down for those. That's just a little bit too much. Most of it will be hidden, but I'm going to wipe down some of that there. Oop. Okay, now this will go on here. Oop, we need to turn that. There we go. All right, I'm going to stand it up quickly just to help keep things all aligned. And now I'm going to let that glue dry. When it's dry, I'll do the other 2 pieces off camera, and we'll do that in the same manner, just on the other side of the rocket. Now, normally after we have the fins done, I would put in the motor mount, but on this I'm actually going to wait, and I'm going to paint this part of the rocket first, and then insert the motor mount, and that just helps keep me from painting the motor retainer and things like that. It won't make any effect on the rocket whatsoever. I'm also not going to attach the elastic shock cord until we get done with painting as well. The glue on all of the tube fins is dry, and at this point you can either add fillets or not. Now, I had some glue come up in here and it dried with a bubble in it, so it doesn't look as good. It doesn't really need the fillet for strength. Instead of using glue, I'm going to use some contour putty here. And this stuff you can just kind of squeeze in. And then either use your finger or a tool here to smooth that in. I'm going to try this. Recently bought these. Bit there. Actually does a pretty good job. Okay. Now once this dries, you can go in with some very fine sandpaper and do a final smoothing there. Okay, now it's got some little boogers here. We can just kind of scrape those off. These will also come off easily once they've dried. Okay, so I am now going to let all those fillets dry, and when we come back, we'll start the priming and painting process. Here I just started painting my rocket, and 2 things have happened. Now, I put a coat of primer on this yesterday, and I probably should have waited another day before doing the top coat. Usually it's not a problem, but I've got some definite crinkling going on in here. The other thing I recognized was that I forgot to put in the launch lug, and this should go inside one of the tube fins there, like that. All right, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of finish fixing here, and I'm going to go ahead and glue this in. When I get back, I should have the painting done, or repainting in this case, and then we'll go ahead and put everything together. I finished painting the main part of the rocket, so this has had 2 layers of primer and then 3 layers of black paint on here, if you include the one I had to sand off. Now I'm going to do things a little bit different than what I had originally planned on in my open rocket design. So I'm going to leave the tube fins black, but I'm going to use this holographic vinyl for the main body tube. Now this is the same type of stuff that craft cutters use, so Silhouette or Cricut machines, and you don't need those machines to use the vinyl. What we will need is a nice straight line. So I'm going to use my tube marking guide here. You can also just use a door frame or a drawer edge. And since this is black, I'm going to have to kind of scratch a line into it rather than draw one here. And this doesn't have to be really heavy. I just need something to guide where it's going to go. So here I'm using the back of my hobby knife blade. Okay, and that gives me a light line there. Okay, so now I'm just going to peel my vinyl. I've pre-measured this by simply wrapping it around the body tube and giving myself just a little bit of overlap there. And it also is going to extend a little bit beyond the forward opening of the body tube, and that will allow us to trim that flush. So now I just need to get this opened. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to find my line here once more. Got to get it in just the right light angle here. And I'm going to make sure to brush off all the dust from my work surface. Because if little dust particles get under this, they form little lumps. Okay. Okay, now don't mush this down until you've got it where you want it there. So now I'm going to hold a little bit of tension on it as I wrap around. And again, I'm just letting this lightly adhere at first. Okay, that looks really good. So once you've got it where you want, oh, there's a little wrinkle there. Once you have it where you want it, and it's all coming out, then go through and squish everything down. Now, I've done this with quite a few rockets, and the main drawback to it is that as temperature and humidity changes, you might get little bubbles or wrinkles in it. Most of the time you can flatten those down again. A little wrinkle there. See if I can squish the air out of it. Okay, and then coming back up to my forward edge here. There we go. Okay, now we're just going to carefully shave this off. Carefully you don't cut into the body tube. There we go. And we just want to make sure we don't have anything sticky still coming up here that might interfere with the nose cone. Okay, now I'm going to put the nose cone on here just briefly. I've decided I'm not going to paint it since it's a nice lovely white there. Okay, so that's going to be about what it'll look like when we get it all finished. Okay, and now we can go ahead and mount the engine mount that we've been saving until we had this painted. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Kevlar line here that we attached earlier. I'm going to feed it back down so it's coming out the aft end. And then we're going to put 2 rings of glue here, but not at the same time. Okay, so again, a wood glue or a white glue. I'm using this one. This has got a little bit longer working time than most. Okay, and so to measure this, I'm going to take this applicator and put it up against the lower edge of the forward ring. And then I'm going to put my thumbnail here at where it meets the engine retainer. And I'm just going to put a blob of glue on here. It's a metric blob if you're interested. Okay, now I'm just going to put this up into the tube until my thumbnail hits, and then we'll rotate that around to form a ring of glue. Now we're going to slide this in. All right, but only about halfway, and then I can tilt that away from the edge there, and I'll put another ring of glue just inside. Alright, and don't worry if you get some glue on the motor mount tube there. It's not going to interfere with anything. There we go, and now we'll just finish this by sliding that part up as well, right until we're flush. Alright, and we will let that dry for a bit. Some time has passed, and now I'm going to put the Kevlar back up through the motor mount here. Shake it till we get it out the other side, so it's just extending right to there. That's good. Alright, here's our elastic shock cord, and on one end of this I'm going to tie a loop. Okay, just a simple water knot here. Okay, we'll just tighten that down really well. This stuff is such you really don't need to glue it. It's got lots of friction holding it. I'm going to cut that down just a little bit. Now with this loop through and untangled here, we're going to pass the end of the elastic through the loop of the elastic, and then we're going to run this all the way down here. Try and get that knot through the Kevlar loop. There we go. Alright, and that ties it down like that. Okay, our free end will tie onto the screw eye here, just with 2 half hitches or a double knot. Okay, and again we're going to cut this back to about 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. Some dull scissors. Alright, and then go ahead and add a little dot of wood or white glue here. Okay, just rub that into the knot. Don't need a lot of it there. Okay, and then finally we can attach the parachute that we had prepped before. And all we have to do is open our snap swivel, snap that into place, and then close it up again. Okay, now if we were going to prep this for launch, we'd want to, we would want to put in 3 to 4 pieces of recovery wadding down inside the tube here, and then we'll fold our parachute. There are lots of ways you can fold a parachute. This is my current favorite. So I'm going to fold the parachute in half such that the anchors, the corners here, all overlap. Okay, so we start out with that side. We should have 2 in the center, and then 2 over here. And then what we're going to do is fold the side corners over onto the center corners there from both sides. Okay, and we're going to take our shroud lines here about halfway, pull those up into a loop, and then we're going to put the sides of our triangle here over those shroud lines. Take the tip and bend it at the halfway point down to the corners, and then just roll or fold the edges over each other here so that we've got a nice little cylinder. And then while holding that, we'll go ahead and stuff the shock cord down inside. Okay, bring up the nose a little bit here. Alright, and then once we've got most of the shock cord in, then we'll go ahead and slide the parachute in there. And that should go relatively easily. If you're having to really force it, something's in the way. Alright, and then make sure that we don't get elastic or the snap swivel or anything else caught between the shoulder and the body tube. Now you can see right there that is way too loose. Alright, I can't even shake it, it just falls out. So we're going to add some masking tape to that. And you don't necessarily have to go all the way around. Start with maybe 1/2 to 2/3 of a circumference and see how that works. Okay, and we'll do our shake test again. That's good. But we can still pull it out with minimal effort, and that's what we want. Okay, so there is my self-designed junk box parts tubulizer rocket. And before I forget it, we'll go ahead and just put that retainer clip on there so we don't lose that. I hope you had fun building this with me. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.